One-time advisor to former President Donald Trump, Peter Navarro, was sentenced Thursday to 4 months in prison for failing to comply with the congressional probe into the January 6 Capitol riot. Navarro was convicted last September on 2 counts of contempt of Congress. U.S. District Judge Amit Mehta ordered him to pay a $9,500 fine. His legal team attempted to skirt the conviction by invoking executive privilege, but the judge rejected it.
Meanwhile, Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a complaint against Nathan Wade, an outside attorney that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis hired to join the team prosecuting Trump for 2020 election interference, and with whom Willis allegedly has had romantic relations. MGT is claiming there could be potential serious violations and that Willis paid him a significantly higher rate compared to prosecutors on the team with the same qualifications. So let's start with Peter Navarro, sentenced to 4 months in prison. That's not a short amount of time, especially considering the current context of the fact that the House Republicans are delaying their contempt vote against Hunter Biden for failing to show up for a private deposition in the investigation into his alleged corruption and alleged financial entanglements with foreign businesses. And now you have Peter Navarro sentenced to this 4-month sentence. It just seems like a double standard of justice.
No, but great to see a Harvard-trained economist going to prison. Love that. I'm just kidding. So, yes, this is interesting considering the context of the ongoing Hunter Biden case. To claim executive prison in this case and say, well, Donald Trump told me not to. He told me to do what I did on January 6th. I didn't want to testify in front of Congress. And, I was just following the president's orders. The judge didn't buy it, didn't love that, ordered to pay the fine, now going to jail. Is Hunter Biden going to face the same fate? I don't know. Does Hunter Biden have some kind of claim to make that, like, Joe Biden's the sitting president, and he also told me not to, and it's executive privilege? It could be very interesting to see how this plays out, but I think it does put some weight on congressional subpoenas that weren't there before. Everyone was like, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to enforce it? I think now we know that there's some enforcement behind the congressional subpoena, and maybe we'll get some information on aliens also as a result of that. But I think, it's important that Congress, our elected officials, are able to get someone to come before them and tell the truth about what they want to know and what they think should be made public.
Yeah, I hope that this is a standard that's held consistently, because this is one of the first times that a congressional subpoena was actually elevated to the level of a crime, or failing to appear for a subpoena, that is, was elevated to the level of a crime and taken up by the DOJ to actually prosecute it. And although I don't buy the executive privilege argument, I think outside of the criminal realm, he had a good political argument to make for not showing up to the January 6th committee. This was a committee that was created, of course, solely by Democrats, staffed solely by Democrats. Nancy Pelosi had a veto over which Republicans were allowed to even sit on the committee. The only ones that she would allow on there were Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. The Republicans didn't get to pick, as they traditionally would, who they wanted to sit on it. The Republicans wouldn't have been allowed the same level of subpoena power as the Democratic investigators. And so I understand 100% Peter Navarro saying, I'm not participating in this because this is completely politically one-sided. This is not a real investigation. You're not following the typical rules of Congress for how these committees are supposed to be run. And even if you compare that to the investigation by the House Oversight Committee into Hunter Biden, the Oversight Committee is politically split. The Democrats did get to choose who was allowed to sit on that committee, and they have the same power that a minority party typically would have in any committee. So I think there's a stronger case for Hunter Biden being held accountable for this than Peter Navarro, which I guess just gets us right back to the argument that Congress should hold Hunter in contempt. And the fact that they're turning around now and allowing his lawyer, Abby Lowell, to stall the contempt charge in favor of further negotiations about how and when Hunter is supposed to appear suggests that they're going to handle this quite differently than the Peter Navarro case.
I think the comedic part of this all for me is the fact that Navarro was a huge part of convincing people that the election was rigged in 2020, that there's a path forward and a strategy to move forward to get Donald Trump to stay in the White House. He bragged about this online and in his memoir, in interviews with Rolling Stone magazine. And it's like, if what you care about is the insurrection or this claim, that was made publicly and convinced many people it was true that the election was stolen. If you care about that, why not prosecute Navarro for that? Why direct the DOJ to hold him for contempt of Congress when really there's high crimes being committed here? Obviously, if you're a Democrat and what you believe is true, that he's guilty as being a part of this strategy, Navarro should face jail time for that before facing jail time for a failure to arrive in front of Congress for this subpoena for the January 6th committee when Merrick Garland was sitting on his hands for months after January 6th, not prosecuting people. There's this claim that they were gathering evidence, but so is the January 6th committee. Is the January 6th committee in Congress able to gather evidence faster than the DOJ? Faster than Merrick Garland? I don't think so. I don't buy it. And that's why it just feels really fake coming from House Democrats. To go about all of this in this way.
Yeah, I wonder if it's the best that they could do, because they would have to make the argument that essentially calling for legal challenges or a legal process to play out that would allow Trump to stay in office after proving perhaps that the election was stolen. Is that a crime to basically allow the legal process to play out, which I'm pretty sure is what Peter Navarro was arguing for. But this, of course, brings us to this Fani Willis allegation, because this Georgia case is fundamentally about whether or not Trump engaged in election interference or a supposed insurrection. And this case is being tried under RICO statutes as well. But is it potentially about to be blown up by the fact that Fani Willis had an alleged romantic relationship with this prosecutor that she hired to help lead the investigation, despite the fact that, first of all, he had basically no experience as a prosecutor. He served as a judge, basically overseeing traffic tickets and family law. Then he was appointed to one of the biggest cases in the history of the Fulton County DA's office. Gets paid almost $700,000 in taxpayer money to pursue this investigation and lead the prosecution, and then turns around and spends it on all of these lavish vacations with Fani Willis.
Yeah, it's really rich. I think it's time for Fani Willis to step aside, because if she cares genuinely about this case, if she cares genuinely about justice and believes that Donald Trump is guilty, which many people do, I think the right thing to do is to step aside, because there's way too much nonsense going on with her having an affair with a married man, going on vacation, paying him a higher salary. At this point, you, in your personal life, it's a big distraction from justice. And so if you're the DA, I don't think many DAs care about justice that much. If Fani Willis does, she should step aside and let someone else step in and take this case, because there are a lot of things that Donald Trump said and did publicly where he cast doubt on the legitimacy of the election. In private phone calls, he said, find the votes. He asked people to go through this process. That was not the typical legal process for counting the electoral votes in nominating or officially confirming someone to be the president of the United States, rather. And I think in this case, if you care about that, if you care about, finding out if Donald Trump really did believe that he had lost the election fair and square and that the votes weren't there and uncounted but actually were never cast, then you've got to step aside and let someone else step in so that this case isn't entirely derailed. I think Fani Willis is doing, the country a disservice going forward if she continues to be the prosecutor on this case.
And I don't think she will step aside, just based on what she's been saying. She accused Nathan Wade's wife of political interference in the case and went to that church and made that bizarre statement about how black women need to be allowed to stumble. So I don't see it happening, but I think you're right. If you do care about this case, that would be the right thing for her to do. We'll be back with more Rising after this.